Good day, ladies and gents. How are you? We're so glad you have joined us for another episode of We're Talking Shift. Today, Lauren and I are going to visit the fact that her girls, her 9-year-old twins, they're still enjoying the practice of the religion that Lauren initially established in her family. But now, Lauren is kind of revisiting what she calls her application of her religious beliefs. So I think she's got a few things that she is wrestling with a little bit. So we're going to find out what that's all about today. Hey, Lauren, what is going on?
Does that sound like some wordsmithing that I just did? And,
I mean, maybe a little, maybe a little.
revisiting the application of the beliefs.
Yeah, that sounded to me like a sort of a roundabout way of saying, I don't know if this works for me anymore. That's what I heard, but I could be wrong. Let's find out.
Let's find out. That's actually exactly where I am, where I don't know if this works for me anymore. But how do you
Mm.
disrupt something that you instilled in your children? And, it's expected that we don't ever question these things. So let's dig into it. I have called on my life coach to assist me in this little situation. And I'm seeking coaching today.
I'll do my best. I'm going to put on my my spiritual, my spiritual whatever hat, and let's see what we can come up with together. Something that might be helpful.
Let's dig in.
All right.
So, my children's father and I were married and we joined a church together, I think before we got married. If not, it was very, very early. So, this was a part of our relationship kind of from the very beginning. And it was a specific Baptist, I'll even say Southern Baptist. That's actually what it was, a Southern Baptist church. And so, those tend to have um, certain guidelines, I guess, for everyone's behavior. And
Mhm.
that is, I think, part of many religions is that there are kind of guideposts or guardrails to help teach you how to behave so that you can be successful in life and a strong representative of your religion.
Mm.
So this was the church that we chose, and he was not raised in that particular religion, but he bought in big time on this church and the practices that we participated in as members of said church. And this was more close to the religion that I was raised in. So none of this was brand new for me. It served us well at the time. However, as you know, as my coach, when Nick and I were going to be going our separate ways, it became a very strong issue for me, internally of kind of wrestling with, I know what's best for me and for my children and where my life needs to go, but I'm also kind of bound by these rules that I have bought into and professed and have been such a large part of our relationship. So eventually I got away from that and now I'm almost like floating through the clouds. Like, what do I believe? Because if I broke up with that situation and those guardrails, what are my guardrails? What do I believe?
Mhm.
However, in the meantime, we had these two children and we raised them in church and they also bought in and they're very strong in their own beliefs. And we're to the point now where they're kind of asking me, Mom, why aren't you and Dad married anymore? Why are you living with a partner? Why aren't we going to church every week? And that's where I am. And I'm kind of asking myself all of these questions.
Ah, okay. So, oh, do you have an answer for them? What's the conversation like when they ask you those questions?
I tend to shut that conversation down, and it's just because I don't know what to say. And I
Ah,
don't want to tell my kids, I don't know if I still believe what I told you we believe.
okay.
That's a hard thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, are you wondering what to tell them, or are you wondering if you should be continuing to support the fact that they still have those those beliefs and tenets from the church you brought them up in? They're still attached and kind of, it's still a big thing for them. And now they're wondering, do they want to go back to church? Are they asking that?
Yes, it seems like they're conflicted because we were all on the same page for so long about so many things. And I do want to be clear in saying that I don't think the things my children took from our time in the church are bad things or things that are not going to serve them in life. In general, I think they took only good things from that experience. However, I don't feel that I belong in that type of church at this point in my life, and I'm kind of unwilling to go back to it. So I'm also torn there of I do want to support what my kids are trying to do and what they still wholeheartedly believe. And I don't ever want to burst any bubbles for them and say, I don't believe this anymore, but you're welcome to believe it. Or this doesn't serve me in my life. So I'm going to kind of stray from that and do my own thing, regardless of what we believe. It's a very weird thing. I don't know how to talk with 9-year-olds about the fact that sometimes you grow and evolve and question things and arrive at a different conclusion than you may have had before.
Well, what you just said right there sounded really clear and easy to understand. And it kind of applies to a lot of things in life. You have certain, you go through phases where you have certain beliefs and standards and rules that you live by based on values, I guess, or lack thereof. Whatever, you have them, but hopefully as a healthy human being, you are growing and evolving, and it's not unusual for a person to question some of their beliefs and values. And sometimes they're good. They're good for a lifetime. The values and beliefs that were instilled in you as a child carry through to adulthood. And that's awesome if they're working for you and you are living a life that you feel good about. But oftentimes, that's not the case. The values, the beliefs that you had as a younger person, maybe a child or a young adult, you find yourself in a place where you are questioning them, and sometimes you feel like they just aren't serving you well. And so you go about figuring out what you're going to replace them with that's better, that does serve you better at this phase in your life. And that's about growth. So it's not only about, something that pertains specifically to your religious or your spiritual beliefs. I mean, that pertains to everything that revolves around the value system that you have established for yourself or are in the process of upgrading, perhaps, right? So that is a conversation that seems like you could easily have with them, because I think they would understand about, for example, if they're 9, the things that they thought were fun or interesting or a good idea when they were 6 probably doesn't apply now that they're 9. So you could find some sort of example that they could relate to, so that they could understand what you're doing. So that's one thing to contemplate. Because at 9, if they're questioning you about these things, then that means they are ready to receive some sort of, an answer or an explanation, or at least a conversation around the subject. If they weren't ready, they wouldn't be asking, right?
I think this is the Southern Baptist in me of we don't question. So it would have never even occurred to me or my siblings to ask our parents, certain questions about why we are taught one thing on Sundays, but we don't completely abide by that all the no one's perfect, right?
Mhm.
But, if my mom let a curse word slip on Monday, we didn't question her on that.
Aha.
So, I think it's just, kind of part of the religion that is in question here is we don't ask questions. We,
So is
we just
that a
follow the
belief?
rules.
Okay. And is that one of the beliefs that you've questioned now in your life, that maybe that's not something that I want to continue to abide by? Maybe I no longer think that that's such a good idea to just follow rules blindly and never question anything. Does that work
Yes,
for
of
you
course.
still?
No, that does not work for me. But then there's this little devil on my shoulder saying, "Of course it doesn't work for you. You're out of alignment with the teachings."
Mm,
So there's
uh-huh.
always kind of a catch here
Yeah.
of, if I were doing the right things,
Mm,
the things I was taught are correct, I wouldn't be in this position. I wouldn't have to answer questions. I wouldn't feel the
mm,
way I feel about it
mm,
in terms of conflict.
mm-hmm.
And in some sense, growth is less important. You want to grow from the background from which I come. You want to grow in relationship with God, but you don't necessarily want to grow in any way that distances you from God. So, some of the personal growth that I've experienced in the last few years has resulted in a distance. And it's partly because I know choosing to get a divorce was choosing to create distance, choosing sin, frankly. And when I made that choice, I kind of accepted that, okay, I'm not as close as I was.
Mm,
However, in my personal life, I'm doing much better. So that's kind
mm-hmm.
of where the conflict is for
Mm.
me. And then for my children, it's just very hard to explain to them. Sometimes the sin is justified because the outcome is exactly what I hoped it would be. How do you say that to children?
I'm not sure. Yeah, that sounds like opening Pandora's box there. Uh,
Right.
so I don't know that they're quite ready for that, and definitely not phrased in that way. But one thing that I would ask, I mean, that's kind of the end justifies the means. Um,
Hmm.
and that could be applied in all kinds of negative ways, right? I mean,
Certainly.
does that mean, well, I stole a candy bar when we went through the store the other day because I was really hungry and I really wanted it. I mean, that's really not a good it's a justification, but is it a good one? Not
Right.
really. No,
Right.
no. So you're justifying bad behavior. So I think I would consider thinking about a different way to have that, conversation. But uh, I would ask you, do you think that you have, is it fair to say that maybe your distancing, uh, I think is the phrase you used, is more from a religious doctrine than it is from God?
Yes.
Okay. So, um, as far as you go, you are just on this journey and you're just, you're not where you were when it comes to the way you practiced your relationship with God, which used to be through the religious doctrine of a Southern Baptist teaching, correct?
Hmm. Right.
All right. Then you have gone through, the things you've gone through in life for these last few years, and you've reached a point of those doctrines I don't think are necessarily working for me anymore. Clearly they're not, because in your words, you've done some things that would be definitely frowned upon or not acceptable within the letter of the law according to that doctrine. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. But you, even though you've still got this little kind of religious hangover still trying to get your attention, you feel pretty good about the place you've landed in your life, and you're a much happier, more fulfilled person. Is that fair?
Definitely.
Okay. So maybe you're not exactly where you want to be with reestablishing your relationship with God, because there's more than one way to do that. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Um, and you can still,
Although
yeah.
Southern Baptists would not.
Okay. But are you still claiming to identify as a Southern
No.
Baptist? Okay. So it doesn't matter then anymore. because that's
Fair.
not your identity now. Is
Right.
that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So I would invite you to stop arguing for that identity.
Period. I needed that. Stop arguing for that identity.
Right. Because every time we come, there's a few times here now where we've talked about something and then you are blah, 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 blah. But, and then
Yeah.
the next thing that comes out of your mouth is some sort of arguing for the identity that fits into that model.
You're right. That's going on inside my head too. It's almost like it's taunting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you were a good Southern Baptist, you would be doing it this way. And I don't know why I haven't just said, okay, but I'm not.
Well, now you can consider if that's something that you want to, have in this argument.
Yes.
Or you can just not have an argument and you can shut it down. Who are you arguing with?
It's the angel and the devil on the shoulders, I guess. I also think a large part of this is from the time I was a small kid in church and people would share their testimonies from the pulpit. They would often say, I went astray, but the Lord kept calling to me. And so a lot of times when these internal arguments are going on, I'm like, is this the Lord calling to me because I'm astray? It's just, there's no way around the thinking about it in terms of my church upbringing and the history there. It's very hard to break up with the history.
Sure, which I understand. I understand that was, your whole upbringing. So I get that. But the Lord calling you, what does that have to do with that particular religion? Do you feel like you could possibly cultivate, a relationship and heed the call in another way that seems like a better fit for you at this point in your life?
Well, the Lord calling me, I'm using air quotes here for those who are listening on audio. The Lord's calling to me is not a calling. It is my inner self reminding myself that I chose sin and I've gone astray and I need to go back to my husband and go back to the Southern Baptist Church and everything will be fine if you return to home base. But I do not believe that. So I'm trying very hard to ignore this internal dialogue that I have with myself of what if I am just gone astray? And what if this lasts, a length of time that is damaging to other people? Because I have a partner involved in my life and I have children involved in this situation. What if I'm just doing all of this damage when really all I need to do is just go back to what I had before?
Yeah, when you were miserable.
I was miserable, yes.
Okay,
yes.
So go back to being miserable. Don't question. Just follow
the Lord
rules.
redeems everything, Loree.
Just follow the rules. Don't question. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to let you think about that and decide if that's really a great idea. And by whose definition, right? You know what? I don't know. This whole thing about the sin, I have an issue with that. I really do. By whose definition? And the outcome of this supposed sin. What is the outcome? And so far for you, it's been nothing but better.
Right.
It doesn't mean everything is perfect, and it doesn't mean that there aren't still some things that you'd like to, reestablish in a certain way in your life. But certain things take time, and you don't need a specific religious doctrine in order to establish your relationship with the Lord, with God, with the universe, whatever you want to call it. So there's nothing wrong with being a seeker. In fact, I think it's a really good thing. Seeking, questioning, being curious. When you know that what you were doing before may have served you well in certain regards at that time, but you outgrew it, then now you're just, in a place where here you are, and you're not exactly sure yet what the direction is, but you know that there probably is one because you're feeling like, okay, maybe there's something else I should be doing. The only thing you know is what you did. So part of your programming is to go back, is like, oh, maybe I should go back, questioning. But that's you know in your heart that that's not right for you, don't you?
Definitely not right for me. And
Okay.
then the Southern Baptist in me would argue like so many people in the Bible just did as they were called to do, even though it didn't appear to be right for them. Like the Lord
Uh-huh.
works it all out for your favor.
Uh-huh.
This is my constant struggle. I do want to touch on something else though, Lori.
Okay.
Prayer.
Okay.
We have gotten away from prayer, and this actually started for me well before the dissolution of my marriage. The separation for me with prayer started when a friend of mine who is a practicing Presbyterian asked me why Baptists pray so much. I'm like, well, we're in relationship with the Lord and we love to have conversations with the Lord, and so we pray. And
Uh-huh.
this just was such a foreign concept to her. She does pray, her family prays, but it's it's more of like a comfort thing versus like a habit that they're
Okay.
in. And so she was saying, you can ask God for anything, but the outcome is already determined. Whatever you ask doesn't matter. You're going to get what you're going to get because the plan is laid before you. And I'm like, okay, true. So why do we pray? Why do we ask God to bless the meal when the Bible says it's already been blessed? Why do we ask God for his favor in a job interview when he's already going to get you to that job or not? You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I started to question the prayer thing long before. And now I feel like when my kids go to their dad's house and he prays over every single meal, half heartedly, but he does. It's a habit for him, as it is with a lot of people. And then they come home and they're just like, "Oh, we're never talking to the Lord here." I'm like, "Listen, I don't know. I don't know how to reconcile this for us."
Okay. well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with praying over every meal. So, um, that's I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but it's actually kind of cute. So, like, I'm not sure that there's anything wrong with praying before every meal. It's a to me that particular ritual is such a really nice reminder of what you have to be grateful for and where your gratitude should be directed. And so be in the habit, and I'm going to say, I'm not in the habit of praying over my meals. Once in a blue moon, I remember, and I will, in a blessing and thankful way, have some sort of a conversation. But it's never been a ritual in my family. But there are other things that I do every single day that help me maintain that connection.
Mm.
So, if there's no harm, I mean, is there a reason you wouldn't want to pray at dinner?
I think for me, I got away from it because it became, are we asking God for things like he's Santa Claus when the outcome is determined? I
Well,
think
mhm,
centering yourself and being thankful for the meal is one thing, but to
yeah.
ask his blessing on the meal, first of all, you're asking, and second of all, it's already blessed.
Mm. Okay. So maybe then it's just a simple thank you for blessing us with this meal. I mean, again, the prayer can be an act of acknowledgement and gratitude. It doesn't, you don't have to be supplicating and asking for things. So whether you believe it's all laid out or not is kind of beside the point. It's, it's who, it's, it's acknowledging that there's a higher power and you feel that presence in your life, and you are just, by your prayer or your thanksgiving, maybe is a better word then, you are just acknowledging that and you're keeping it front of mind, because
Mm.
the prayer, the acknowledgement of gratitude, of thanksgiving, of giving credit where credit is due, uh, acknowledging that there's something greater than you, working here, within you and around you. That's a really nice state of mind to be in. And if you don't do things, even something as simple as saying thanks at a meal, it's really easy to forget that because we get caught up in all of the stuff of life, and it's very easy to get, kind of swept down with a current of things that are happening as you go through your day. Whereas if you have these little reminders, it kind of helps bring you back to a place that's a little more centered, a little grounded in something greater. And I just think there's nothing but good things that can come from a practice like that, especially if, like your girls, they're already accustomed to that. They seem to enjoy it. So would it be difficult, or would there be a reason not to say, all right, well, let's do that at dinner or breakfast or whatever?
No, no reason at all. You're right. I do think, though, we got to a place with one of them specifically where I got a little concerned. Very recently, she came home from school and she was crying and she said, I had a really bad day. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. What happened? And she goes, well, the worst part is that I prayed about it. And I asked God to give me a good day. And when it started going bad, I prayed about it. And God did not give me a good day. And this was really concerning to me because I'm like, look, uh, how do you fix this for her
Mm,
when it was just destined
mm,
today that her day was going to be bad, as
mm,
bad as it can be for a third grader. So
mm-hmm,
I think that's where I am on the prayer thing. And until I can get that part worked out of,
mm-hmm,
sometimes you're going to ask God to spare a grandparent who is ultimately going to die. And then you're going to have some questions and I'm not ready to answer them. Like, I don't know how to say, yeah, you begged God to keep so and so alive and
mm.
that person's gone. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I feel
Well,
like that's where I am on the prayer thing.
sure, sure. Well, maybe it's then just trying to, in a very a way that is brought down to their level, something like God's not a magician, um, right? And everyone has their path. And prayer doesn't necessarily mean constantly asking for God to produce, pull rabbits out of hats. Again, that's not, that's not the role. The role is you get to have, as a human being with free will, God has given us the opportunity to create a good day for ourselves, to create the way that we want to react and take initiative and be responsible for ourselves and be responsible for how we respond to things going on in our environment or around us. So it doesn't, otherwise, it's pretty easy to blame everything that doesn't go the way you want it to on God. That's childish. It's irresponsible, and I think you kind of missed the point, right?
Mhm.
It's so uh, maybe something around that type of idea would help her understand that, just everyone has days that aren't the best days. That's part of life. It doesn't have anything to do with God not listening to you, but there's things that, just because you pray and ask for something doesn't mean it's supposed to roll out just the way you think it should, and then you get upset and disappointed when it doesn't happen. I mean, that's part of how you learn to um, be resilient, develop emotional maturity, and deal with things. Those are things we must do to become, good, strong, level-headed human beings. So, helping her understand maybe a little bit of, in that context, that just because you ask doesn't mean every day is going to be like a day at Disneyland. I mean, that's not what life is all about. It's about
Right.
learning and growth and challenges. And sometimes we have bad days or days that aren't even that bad. They just didn't turn out the way we want to. We wanted it to. So it's like, oh, this day had it out for me. Well, okay, now you have a victim mentality. That's not good. How about just, accepting that some days aren't as good as others, but we soldier on, kiddo. Tomorrow's a new day. Make it a better one.
This seems so practical when you're saying it, but I swear when she gets in my car crying and saying these things, it feels like the world is caving in on me. I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not easy to have a conversation with someone when they are in the throes of emotions. So, first of all, the better thing is just a little consolation and calming down. And then when things aren't quite at such a quite, a heightened state of emotion, then, and then you have time to think, okay, what are the really important messages that need to be conveyed here? And then you can have a calm conversation and maybe, drop some seeds in her mind that will land that she can understand.
Agreed.
All right.
I like that.
Okay.
I have another one for you.
All right. Let's have it.
I have someone close to me who is also parenting children very close in age to mine. And that person does not feel introducing religion to, and we had this conversation when mine were in church with me and their father. She does not feel introducing religion to her children is a wise thing to do at all, that they are too young to understand something of very great magnitude. And, if they eventually find whatever their beliefs are on their own, then that's for them to discover. However, when my husband and I were implementing these ideas into our family, we definitely disagreed with that. And now I'm kind of in a place where, again, my kids are about the same age as her kids, and I am starting to wonder, would mine have naturally arrived at this same place they are now, or even down the line? Would they have chosen this for themselves? Because I'm kind of choosing to do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So have I done something irresponsible? And, to someone who is kind of just starting out on this path, what are your thoughts on choosing religion for children?
Well, I don't think there's one right way to do that. I really don't. I think that this is what you have. So wondering about what might have been had you not done it is a waste of time, right? Because here you are, it's done. And now you have 9-year-old girls who have some religious foundation that they seem to be, pretty attached to right now.
And again, most of the things they took from it, I would say, are positive.
Perfect.
So there is that.
Sure. So, she's going to do her thing her way. And I don't know if it's the best way or a better way or a not so great way. And it really, again, it doesn't really matter. Well, only thing that matters is where you're at in your life, where your kids are at, and how you want to move forward. That's it. Don't be looking over there at what they're doing or not doing and try to figure out if that means you're doing something wrong. Why? What does that serve, right? The thing is, though, you realize now, as an adult woman, that there's some things here that I think I'm questioning, that don't fit for me anymore, and I'm going to kind of slowly make my way into finding that thing that is a better fit for me, whatever that ends up being, right? Okay, but you still have a foundational belief, right? You still believe in a higher power. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's still something that you want to maintain and perhaps even nurture more. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And your girls are only 9. They have a great foundation. From what I understand you to say, there's nothing really going on with what they've learned through that religion that you think is negative or detrimental or counter to what you believe so far.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Except I didn't realize it was going to affect my adult life in the ways that it has. So there's that too.
Okay. But so let's stick with the first question, which is well, I guess the question was, it was really in the form of a fear of, have I done them wrong by putting them on this path? Because that's not what my friend's done. Is that fair? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. If you feel like the there are some constraints or some rigidity in the doctrine that they have so far, that's what's laid their foundation, then you are in a position right now, while they are still young, to open up their minds and expose them to some other things. So that then, as they get a little bit older, they have something. They have something to measure by. There's some basic things that they've learned, and that's great. But there's also this other way of thinking about things, or practicing their relationship, and so they've got some. The ability to make some choices based on more information instead of less. You can supply that more information starting today if you want. You don't have to wait and then wonder if they're going to find a different way on their own. You're the parent, you're the authority. And if you feel like it would be in their best interest to have a broader scope of what's available when it comes to how you want to think about, your spirituality, then it's up to you as their mother to introduce them to that, and let them see that, or understand that there are some things, there's more than just what they have been fed so far. You can build on that in a way that is not rigid, that's expansive.
I will need to do some responsible research into how to do that well, because I am interested. When I was in college, I took, I think it was a humanities course, and we just kind of looked at some of the major world religions, and it was my first look into other thought systems, and some of them are really beautiful, have really beautiful traditions, and
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have changed my life for me to have learned about them when I was younger, but I do still appreciate having some knowledge of some other processes.
Yeah. There's so many there, like you said, there's so many beautiful religions and different ways to go about, cultivating your relationship with God. That I think it's a really awesome adventure, if you will, to go on this path of seeking and learning. You'll find so many commonalities, and then you'll find some things that are different, and it gives you something to contemplate and think about. And it can't, I don't see that that's harmful in any way. I think I just think it's expansive, and there's just no one right way for everyone. As much as certain religions would have you think that, but that's kind of that's not a good thing either, right? That's how we end up in
The
religious
path
wars.
is narrow, Loree. Not everyone gets to walk it.
Well, yeah, there's some issues with that, but but yeah, why don't you just find a few things that are age appropriate and introduce those to them so that they can think about things in a broader context than perhaps they're thinking about them now.
We can definitely try to do that and work on diversifying a little bit, or just exposing them to other things. I do think there are, so their dad's dad is of the Jewish faith, and he practices his religion on high holidays mostly, but that was important to me from the very beginning, to expose my daughters to that. And so they've had a little bit of that in their lives as well. So I wouldn't say that we've kind of been on a very narrow stream here, but definitely I think something's going to have to give, because I just don't want them to have the same beliefs that I had that did not serve me well as a young adult. I just don't want them to find themselves in similar situations.
Okay. And what is the way right now that you are going to be able to achieve that?
We will try to find some age appropriate information, and to just learn about other cultures and religions and ways of going about life. I think as long as the basic tenets of being a good person are present, then it's probably one we can learn more about.
All the greatest religions that have stood the test of time have pretty much those basic tenets about being a good human. So I don't think you have to worry too much about that. And I love what you just said, except for the word try. Well, maybe
What did I say?
when I said, how are you going to achieve that? And you said, well, we will try to.
We will plan.
There we go. Yeah.
We will endeavor.
Yes, that's better.
We will endeavor.
Right.
I do want to give you kind of a comparison
Mm.
of some things that have changed for my kids that are almost tangible. These are so big in their lives, besides the prayer thing and praying at every meal. Another one that was really pervasive, I guess, in our past life, I worked really hard to make religious holidays religious. So Christmas was like, we did do the Christmas tree and we did exchange gifts. But as far as, delivery of presents from Santa Claus, that wasn't something that I perpetuated. Easter, I didn't do Easter baskets. I still don't, because for what Easter is supposed to be, it's almost like, how could you turn this into chocolate eggs and a plush bunny? You know what I mean? Like, that's just crazy to me. Even still, that's a little bit crazy to me. But as they have become less involved in, like, myself and their dad having these holiday celebrations, just us, and it's become more of, we're spending holidays with extended family, we've let some of the influence seep in a little bit. And so that's one of the things too that I find I'm struggling with, because that was so important to me before, and now it's just, things have changed.
Mm-hmm. And it was important to you before because?
Well, the Easter thing, I think, is still something that I'm just like, how did we turn this into a commercialized holiday?
Mhm.
Like, I almost don't even think it's one that should be celebrated. It should really be observed, Like, that's like saying, Happy Memorial Day. Like, this is Easter we're talking about. So the fact that it's like Easter egg hunts and baskets of crappy gifts is just crazy to me. So I still I still deal with that one. The Christmas thing, though, I mean, I don't know. I guess it was important because I just wanted the focus to be on Jesus and not so much on, like, gifts and Santa and the holiday. And now I just feel like I've kind of acquiesced to something different.
Mm-hmm. Something different. So I don't know if I'm hearing you right. Now they get to kind of do the presents, and it's kind of more about the fun of the holiday, just
Yes.
like Easter, and it's less focus put on the meaning. Is that fair?
Right. Yes.
Okay. And that was very important to you before because of the religion that you identified with, and that was just part of how you acknowledged those holidays, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So now you no longer identify with that.
I think I still identify with, like, Christmas needs to be about Jesus.
Okay.
But because I'm no longer kind of in control of Christmas as much, we celebrate now with my family rather
Okay.
than just us at home, and I'm
Okay.
in charge of
So
it.
what's the downside?
Of the Santa Claus perspective.
What's the downside of how you're celebrating now more with family than how you used to do it a few years ago? What is the downside of what's going on now?
I definitely don't want them to lose sight of why we observe these holidays.
Okay, and how can you make sure they don't lose sight?
Well, I'm not taking them to church, so I don't know the answer to that.
Well, okay, do you know? I mean, you must know then what the meaning is that you want conveyed, that you don't want them to lose sight of, right? Do you need a church for that? Can't you, Mom, talk to them about that?
interesting perspective.
I'm just inviting you, Lauren, to step into the role of teaching them the things that you still want them to be aware of and have some reverence for.
Mm-hmm.
If teaching them about the real meaning of Christmas and why we do all this, in addition to having the fun part and family and gifts, but the meaning part is important to you. You can do that. Why are you trying to outsource that to going to church, but then you don't go to church?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have the church to do it. You don't have to outsource it. And it's the same with Easter. You already know the meaning, right? You know what you want them to know about it. That's so you can take on that role. You're their mother.
What a concept.
Yeah, I would just invite you to take the responsibility for teaching them the things that you want them to know, the things that are important to you.
I will say that would never fly in a Southern Baptist household.
But are you still
We're not
there?
identifying as that.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what flies there.
But that's why I have a harder time when
Yeah.
you say these things and I'm sitting here like, am I stupid? Like, why did I not think of that? It's because I'm just conditioned to think differently.
Yes.
That's why.
Yes. And do you want your girls to be conditioned to think differently?
I want my girls to definitely explore some varied options and
Okay.
to decide what is true for them.
Yeah. So you want them to be conditioned to question, to be curious, to explore things, to be able to do some critical thinking on their own, to be open-minded and consider that there's other ways to look at things, other perspectives, other practices. You don't want them to be close-minded and blindly follow rules without questioning things. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay. So how
Very
is that
fair.
going to happen if you don't make it happen?
You're right. You're right. It makes perfect sense hearing it from someone else. You're on the outside looking in, so it's a different perspective.
It is.
But I do appreciate it. That's why I have a coach.
It is. And of course, you are not stupid. You're a very intelligent woman. And I get it, though. We get conditioned into certain beliefs and patterns and habits, whether it's religion or other things. And if we don't, sometimes it's really hard to just see things from another perspective, which is why it's nice to bounce things off of someone else that has a different perspective, whether it's a coach or whoever else, a partner or a trusted friend, whatever. Because we can get a little tunnel visioned. We can sort of get stuck in that patterned way of thinking that we were brought up in. And we can just kind of struggle with, oh, that was a blind spot. It seems so obvious now. It's just a blind spot. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. So I'm just inviting you to go, I can do all of this myself, and I can do it starting the minute I want to start. And I can present these other things, these meanings to my daughters without actually taking away some of the festival type feelings or the festivities that have been going on now, a little more to what you were used to. Can they enjoy both? Can they enjoy that part of it, but still understand the meaning? Of course. You don't have to sacrifice one for the other.
I certainly hope you're right because they really love magical Christmas, as they call it. Mimi's magical Christmas.
Yeah. It's a wonderful part of childhood. Why
You're
not? Right?
You're
It
right.
it is.
I did have magical Christmases growing up.
Yeah.
All
Me
credit
too.
to my parents. We
Yes.
definitely had that.
Yeah, I did too. And so did our kids. And even though they were, the magical Christmas, they didn't grow up to still believe in Santa Claus. They didn't grow up to not understand the meaning of Christmas. So, it's such a fleeting time in a person's life that I personally, everyone's different, but I don't see the harm in it if it's balanced properly. And it's just, we all have such delightful memories of that. Why rob them of that opportunity if you don't have to?
I agree.
Yeah. Good. So what are you gonna do at dinner tonight?
Well, if you listened to our episode last week about family mealtime and healthy dinners, then you might be surprised to know that I currently don't know. I don't have a plan for dinner tonight. So here's just hoping that we can get something together and that we will open the meal with some Thanksgiving and some reflection on our many blessings.
I think that's lovely, whatever the meal ends up being. Yeah.
Isn't it kind of funny to thank God for the nutrition of Taco Bell?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would look at it quite that way.
See?
Especially since I'm not sure that there is any nutrition there. Maybe
Exactly.
maybe you thank God for the resources to be able to feed your kids and not send them to bed hungry. And perhaps we'll do better with a different meal tomorrow. But
I will not be doing Taco Bell this evening. But don't think it didn't cross my mind when I got over here at 1:00 and realized I don't have plans for dinner, but that's okay.
Uh-oh.
What I do have plans for, Loree, and here's a little update some of our listeners might be hoping to hear. I do have plans for a dog sitter on spring break.
Oh my God.
This is earth shattering. I told you if I asked my neighbor to take my dog for a walk one time, I would pass away.
Yes.
And
And
here I
maybe you
am.
didn't ask because you're still here.
Here I am. I'm still among the living.
Okay.
Pinch me. Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
The dog would be enjoying walks with my neighbor. She was more than happy to assist me on that.
Oh.
However, my plans have changed. And
Okay.
I don't have to do the travel, but I did take on the challenge, Loree. And I did ask for some assistance there. I did it. And of course, I was not surprised at all that my kind and gracious neighbor was willing to help out and be neighborly. So that's the
Wow.
update.
Okay. I freaking love that. I really do, because I thought, I haven't really heard from Lauren on this, except for I think the day after I texted you and said, how did it go with the neighbor? And you're like, well, I haven't been over there yet. And I was like, ugh. Ugh. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to drop it and let's just see how this plays out. I'm not going to hound you about it. And so I can't tell you how proud of you I am. You actually mustered up the courage. You went.
I did it.
You made the big ask. You did not perish. You did not die or pass away or experience any kind of awful affliction. So we can be grateful to God for that, right?
Yes.
And grateful that you had such a lovely neighbor who was so willing to be helpful.
She's wonderful. She really is. She's also, when she was aware that I was taking a vacation several months ago, before I even had the dog, she reached out to me and was like, hey, do you need me to get your mail? Do you need me to water your plants? And I'm like, who does this? She's a very nice person. She made it very easy to break the ice and ask for help for the very first time in my entire life.
All right.
So,
So how did you feel after you walked away from that conversation with your neighbor that went so splendidly well?
I was incredibly nervous the whole time of just putting someone out in that way, which is so silly. But then as I was walking away after the fact, I was like, this is really silly. This is a person, we speak to each other every day. She'll wave at me from her porch every morning. Our dogs cross paths on the sidewalk. Her dog comes over to my house and hangs out with my kids. Like, we have an established relationship here. So I did feel kind of silly for making such a big deal about it. But that is just kind of the way that I operate.
Used to operate.
Until this week.
Yeah.
I was also very relieved, though, to be able to tell her a couple of days later, hey, it turns out I don't need any help with the dog. Like, that felt like a huge relief for me for some reason.
Yeah. But now if the situation arises again, will you hesitate to go ask her again?
I will hesitate.
But
But if it comes down to it and I absolutely need some help, I know who to call.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. I say keep nurturing that relationship. She sounds like a very lovely lady. Hey, maybe you and the girls could make something like cookies or something and bring her some just to show your appreciation for having such a lovely neighbor.
Maybe we should. My luck, she'll be allergic or intolerant, and I will have killed my neighbor.
With your luck, okay, we're gonna have to talk about that. Yeah, the likelihood of that happening with a woman of her generation is unlikely. It's highly unlikely. It's possible, but it's highly unlikely. So I say, it's the gesture that matters. So just, maybe avoid nuts. I mean, that's about it.
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, this is kind of a deep conversation, obviously. Anything around God, religion, higher power. It's pretty deep. We could talk on about this for hours, but hopefully what we did touch on today gives you some ideas to think about, how you want to move forward with this subject in your girls.
Definitely a lot to consider, and I will say that while we stopped going to church as a side effect of my choice to get a divorce. I didn't feel like I could show my face in a church at that time, but it has turned out to be a decision that has allowed us opportunities to look into other things we were or were not doing as well, and to kind of say, well, if going to church twice a week wasn't fully necessary to facilitate our relationship with God, what other things are we doing out of rote that aren't necessarily beneficial to us or to that relationship? So I've had that little breakthrough and appreciation for the circumstance in that way. So you've given me some more to think about today, Loree.
Good. I like the way you said that. Yeah, that it's kind of led to some other breakthroughs. So that's very intriguing. We'll have to tee that up for another episode.
Love that.
I want to hear about these breakthroughs. If there's something I haven't already heard about. Yeah. All right. That was good stuff. And I'm looking forward to hearing, if you implement a few things like, whatever the gratitude or the prayer around dinner and see, see what happens with the girls, what they think about this. So you'll have to, we'll check back and see how things are going in a week or two.
A week or two. Give me some time, Loree.
Okay. A couple weeks.
I'm still recovering from talking to the neighbor. Okay.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, I don't want to put too much pressure on you. So whenever you're ready, how's that?
That sounds good. And whenever you are ready, our kind listeners, be sure to join the We're Talking Shift Facebook group. That is where we will be continuing this conversation and so many others. Lots of good shift in there every single day, Loree. So check us out on that page in that group, and be sure to follow us on whatever social media you prefer, as well as rate, review, and share the podcast.
I love it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Now go make some epic shift happen in your lives and tell us all about it. See you next time.